Wednesday here on the North Shore Drive podcast, Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. We're going to talk about what Art Rooney was saying in his earlier press conference this week about the state of the Steelers. And is he headed in the right direction as far as what he aims the Steelers to get good at in the next couple of years, talking about them still needing to be a team that can win on the ground. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about how they're spending in their salary cap and what are the coaching changes that will happen, because he did say some were happening. So we're going to look further at what the Steelers can do here, all there on the North Shore Drive podcast. Let's get into it. You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter. Hello, welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter, joined today by one of our great Steelers beat writers, Ray Fittipaldo. And as always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of our Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes that you can find on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. And as always, this show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. Whether you're injured in a car accident or hurt on the job, Edgar Snyder Associates has helped injured victims for over 40 years recover more than $2 billion on their behalf. If you or a loved one have been seriously injured in an accident, call 1-800-94-EDGAR or visit www.edgarsnyder.com for a free consultation. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Ray, Art Rooney spoke this week on Monday, and we had Brian and Jerry talk about the quarterback side of things, but I want to talk about something else that he mentioned, and it's kind of at the heart of what the Steelers are trying to do. But Art Rooney still believes that the Steelers' path to getting back to being a Super Bowl contender is being a team that can run the ball well and play well in the trenches. Quote, he said, "We've got to build on the strengths that we can put together. I still think that running the ball is a route to success, particularly when you play in the north and outside. It's interesting that we have two teams in the Super Bowl with such different styles. It shows you can win with more than one approach. I think the bottom line is you've got to try to win with the talent that you have in the building." And so when he's talking about that, clearly he's referring to how the Eagles are a supreme running team. They scored 7 rushing touchdowns in the NFC Championship game. The Chiefs, though, I don't think are the pass-happy Chiefs that they used to be. They also run the ball pretty well now. But clearly the plan is for the Steelers to become this more efficient offense on the ground. It hasn't happened yet. But, Ray, is this foolhardy on the part of the Steelers? Or, should they be abandoning their current quest and trying to more so become one of those higher rate passing teams that you see in some places in the NFL?
Yeah, I mean, Chris, you always want to be balanced. But if you look around the NFL right now, the Eagles aren't the only team that's having success with the running game. I mean, in a different type of a year, maybe the Ravens, could be in the Super Bowl. Listen, the Ravens were the number 1 seed last year, and they lost a nail biter in Buffalo in the divisional round. So they're not going away with their type of offense. And there's many other teams like that where, the running game is making a comeback. It's becoming more important, and I think the Steelers have to be able to do that, as you said, more efficiently. Maybe not more often, but they have to run the ball better than, being 30th in yards per carry average or whatever they were this year, right? But, I mean, in the end, Chris, this is a passing league. The rules are set to have success in the passing game. Even Lamar Jackson can throw it around the yard. Josh Allen throws it around the yard. Jaylen Hurts. I mean, the Steelers made a commitment not to allow Saquon Barkley to win that game. They held Saquon Barkley in check. Jaylen Hurts was good enough to throw all over them, and that's how they beat the Steelers 34-17. So my point is, yes, you want to have a good running game. It's got to be a big part of your offense, but you also have to be balanced as well.
You do have to be balanced. I mean, you look at how the Lions play. Jared Goff isn't the best, quarterback in the league, nor is he in that caliber. But you know what? He was able to play in a balanced offense because Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery were running over everybody. And Penei Sewell and that offensive line, they were a problem all year long. But you look at the top teams that ran the ball this past year, the Ravens, the Eagles, and also the Commanders. Like, for as much as we're talking about how the Commanders with Jaden Daniels throwing the ball was awesome, they ran the ball well this season. That was a big part of what made them a really good team. And in fact, the top 6 teams running the football, they all made the playoffs this year. 3 or 4 of those top 6 made the division round. 3 of those top 6 made the conference championship round. So, and of course, the number 2 rushing team in the NFL right now is the Eagles. They're in the Super Bowl. And so, I look at that and I think, man, if the Steelers could be like one of those teams, then it becomes that much easier for you to throw the football. I mean, you look at Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts didn't do a whole lot of spectacular things, but he doesn't have to in the Eagles offense. That's the whole point, is that you kind of have defenses that have to overcommit to stopping Saquon Barkley like the Steelers did, and then say, all right, well, we got A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Figure it out with those guys. And, of course, Dallas Goedert fits in that equation as well. And Jalen Hurts is a good enough quarterback to do that. And Jalen Hurts, I would even say, is a good quarterback, but he's not in that upper tier with Mahomes, Burrow, Allen, Jackson. Like, he's not in that tier. And I think that if the Steelers are looking to try to get the kind of success the Eagles have, which I think that's what kind of Art Rooney was alluding to there, I think that that's where you have to look at it and say, look, Jalen Hurts isn't all, he's not a superstar quarterback, but if we can get an above average quarterback like him to play with a really good offensive line in a run game that's dangerous and force people to honor that while also having a really good defense, that could be your ticket to being a contender again, whether that quarterback's Justin Fields or someone that you draft in the next 2 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just Saquon Barkley in Philadelphia. Look at the resources they've poured into their offensive line in the draft. Landon Dickerson, second-round pick. Lane Johnson, former first-round pick. I know he's getting up there. He's been around a while. Even Juergens. I think Juergens was a second-round pick. They targeted him to be Kelsey's successor, and then after a couple of years, he turned out to be that guy. So, winning in the trenches is going to be a part of this. We knew that when they brought in Andy Weidel. That's what he believes in. And I hate to keep going back to Philadelphia, but I'll do it with their defensive line as well. Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter. I mean, they load up in the trenches, and I think the Steelers want to follow that blueprint. They've made some choices the last couple of years that have got them on that path. Not all those guys have panned out right away, but I also think, Chris, got to give us some time too, right? I mean, Philadelphia wasn't built in just 1 year. I think we can all recognize, and Art Rooney kind of alluded to this yesterday when he said, the Steelers aren't closer to winning a playoff game this year than they were last year. I think this is, we're probably in the very beginning stages of a multi-year rebuild, right? You don't have a franchise quarterback. Your O-line and your defense are lacking. You got to build that back up. You need receiver help. And I think I think Art is right. I think you build up the trenches first, and then when you're ready to win, you go out and get your quarterback, and then you can kind of hit the ground running, and you get that rebuild could be a little bit shorter. So maybe the right thing to do is to add that quarterback as the last piece, and then build up the roster in other ways. Before you do that.
I think right there, that's what you're looking at. You're saying, hey, this team has to build to get there, and I think this goes into Art Rooney's whole decision about why he's not blowing up the entire coaching staff. Is talking about, hey, like, this is a team that clearly still is on the mend. If you blow it up, he says again, he likes some of the young pieces. He talked about the O-line. He's like, he likes the last 2 draft classes they brought in, and certainly they can be better, but he's like, they also like they're on the rise. To your point, the Eagles were not built overnight. They had, several losing seasons without winning a playoff game. They had, or season they didn't win a playoff game, and then also losing seasons as well. They went 4-11 in the year before they got Nick Sirianni, and then they went 9-8 the year after that. And then I think over the years before that, they had been drafting guys like Jalen Carter, like Jordan Davis, like Cam Juergens. They've been drafting guys, and they've been able to sign smart guys. They built this culture where now they control both sides of the line of scrimmage. The defensive line wins a lot, the offensive line wins a lot, and then that makes it easier for linebackers like Zach Bond to be a playmaker. It makes it easier for quarterbacks like Jalen Hurts to be a playmaker, and then also when you get the best running back in football in Saquon Barkley, makes it that much bigger when they're that much bigger of a playmaker. I think that's where he's acknowledged. And like, look, the reason they went and got Andy Weidel because they loved what he was helping do in Philadelphia. So you got to get to here. And you and I talked about this leading up to the Eagles game. They weren't going to win that Eagles game because, one, they don't win in Philly, but two, the Eagles are much further in the process of what the Steelers are trying to do right now. So I just think the whole point of that is you don't blow that up when you know that this was always a long-term game and that you're trying to get there. But in the process, you do need to make sure that you're developing those picks and those investments that you're making. Otherwise, when you do get to that stage, you won't be as ready.
Yeah. And I don't want to downplay the second and third levels of the defense, but, Zach Bond was a special teams player in New Orleans. You stick him behind that front, he turns into an all-pro. Yep. And look at what were the last pieces for that Eagles defense this year in the draft, right? You
Corners.
get Mitchell and you get Cooper DeJean. Clearly, there's a formula, there's a blueprint there. I think the Steelers are trying to follow that. So, we'll be talking about the draft a lot here in the next couple, months, and free agency as well. But I think the number one priority is defensive line, and I think it should be given the way the season ended.
It should be indeed. I want to talk more about how they invest in this team as far as what they're trying to build through and how they do it with how they build their salary cap as well as the draft. We'll do that next here with a study that Ray's been putting together here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. At first, I want to remind you this show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. If you're injured in an accident and you're probably wondering what's next, well, for over 40 years, Edgar Snyder Associates has helped injured victims answer that very question. Whether it's gathering evidence, collecting medical records, or dealing with the insurance companies, Edgar Snyder Associates has helped over 75,000 people handle the question, what's next? Call 1-800-94-EDGAR or visit www.edgarsnyder.com for a free consultation. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. We're back here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, one thing that everyone said all year and have said for a couple years now, the Steelers have the most expensive defense and the least expensive offense. And a lot of people think that has to change. I also think that when people talk about that, they don't acknowledge that a lot of that is because most of the offense is on rookie contracts and they're trying to build up with build a young core together. But is that something that you could see changing this offseason now that they have, they think they have what, 40 plus million in cap space now that could jump up to 60 or 70 million with some very easy cuts that they could make to guys like Preston Smith and Larry Ogunjobi. Is this the year where you see maybe more of that free agent money during the next couple of months go to the offensive side of the ball?
Yeah, if you look last year, obviously the big free agent signing was Patrick Queen, the biggest free agent contract in team history. I think it probably is time, Chris, to go out. If you don't go out and target like that T. Higgins type, you got to get somebody who's in that realm. And I think that's going to cost you, more than $20 million a season. I could see them even dipping in to the running back market on a much smaller level, to try to get somebody in here along with a draft pick to back up Jaylen Warren to build up that backfield with Najee Harris leaving. So, those are two positions I think where you could see more, spending on the offense. But Chris, if you look at the top teams in the NFL this year, I think the Rams were number one spending on offense. The Chiefs were number two, and the Ravens were number four. And if you go down top 5, top 10, it's similar. I think, it would be like 7 or 8 out of the top 10 teams in the top 10 made the playoffs this year. So, offense roles in the NFL. I do think eventually the Steelers are going to have to start building up your team in that way, but there's still some big contracts on the defensive side. I think the point is it's not going to happen overnight, but you don't want to be 32nd in offensive spending either. You kind of want to get that up over the next couple of years.
Agreed. And a big part of that also we should acknowledge is that a lot of those teams, they're paying for a franchise quarterback that they have. Like the Rams, they've got Matt Stafford. He carries a big check. The Chiefs, because the Rams are spending the most on offense last year. The Chiefs, they're next up, Patrick Mahomes. They got that contract. The Colts are in a bit of an anomaly. They got $137 million tied up in offense, and they got Anthony Richardson at quarterback. I don't know what I think it's interesting to see that breakdown. But the Bengals, they just signed Joe Burrow. The Falcons, they signed Kirk Cousins. The Cowboys, they signed Dak Prescott. Cardinals, Kyler Murray. You go down the line, it's a lot of it is because they're investing in the quarterback. What's crazy, the Ravens are like, I think the 10th or 11th most spending, and they got Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. That's kind of crazy that they're not higher up in that list. But to your point, the Steelers, you're not going to be paying that much for a quarterback. So then dump it in other things. Put it in getting a running back. Like, the Ravens, they weren't afraid to go get Derrick Henry, even though they already had Lamar Jackson in their backfield. That really worked out for them this year. The Eagles, they went right and got Saquon Barkley, and I think that's the biggest reason why they're in the Super Bowl right now, because they have the best running back in football with maybe the best offensive line in football. Yeah. So, if you're the Steelers, what ways can you smartly invest in this offense? Is it going and getting a T. Higgins that's really expensive but could be really useful to whatever quarterback that you get? Is it reinvesting in the offensive line? Isaac Seumalo, I know he was named to the Pro Bowl as a replacement player, but didn't have his best year. And so, maybe it's signing an offensive lineman to work with the young core that you put together. Maybe it's getting a running back, like you said. Either way, I think that it's it's showing that, to your point, the Steelers could do more to invest in this offense. It's not always about drafting. Sometimes it is about signing and adding veterans who can up your room a little bit.
Yeah, and interestingly, Isaac Seumalo was the offensive player on the Steelers who took up the biggest percentage of their offensive cap this year. He was around making over the cap hit wise. I think he was making $8 million in salary, but his cap hit in the 2024 season was something like over $10 million. Then I think it was Najee Harris, and then you go down the line. The bottom line is, like you said, they got a lot of guys on rookie contracts. That's going to change in the coming years. You will have Freiermuth. That cap hit's going to go up, obviously, whether you bring back Russell Wilson or Justin Fields. You'll have a quarterback on there this year. So it is slowly going to go up. I think what we're talking about here is, do you go out in free agency and add a nice piece where you're going to have to make a bold move, almost like a Patrick Queen type of move, but you do it on offense this year. Do they have that in them? Listen, receivers are really expensive. If you want to go out and get T. Higgins, you're probably going to have to spend $25, $27 million a year. We'll see if they do that. But if they do, I think it'd be a welcome step by many Steelers fans who feel like they've been kind of underspending on offense and overspending on defense the last couple of years.
I think one of the tricks right there could be too is how you handle quarterback as far as spending wise, right? Because if they sign Justin Fields, Art Rooney said, it's going to be either Justin Fields or Russell Wilson. Both of them don't want to be on a team with each other on it, because both of them want to start and they know that each other are competition. So if you get either one of those guys, you need that contract to not be in the $30 million range. You need to be, maybe 20 or even less than that, so that then you can afford to go get a T. Higgins type player. Because, if you aren't spending at quarterback, then you can up your money and say, all right, cool, we're not spending high on quarterback. And listen, if you sign Justin Fields for 2 years, and as Art Rooney acknowledged, they want to invest in quarterback in the draft this year and next. And I think that the Steelers are smart enough to recognize this isn't a strong quarterback draft year. Next year's looks a lot better. Say that the next year is that year where they go find their future franchise quarterback, then if that guy is the guy, and that guy quickly ascends, and the way that some rookie quarterbacks do in the NFL, then all of a sudden you have a quarterback on a rookie deal for the next 5 years, where it's not expensive, it's not hurting your salary cap, and then having a T. Higgins contract doesn't kill your ability to invest around him. In fact, you've already invested around him. So I do think, as high priced as T. Higgins could be, this is the most attainable position that the Steelers have been in to go get one of those types of players that everyone's going to want. Because let's make this clear, that's going to be a sweepstakes. T. Higgins is going to cost a pretty penny, because everyone's going to be going after him. But this isn't Deebo Samuel or Brandon Ayuk, where the Steelers would have to give up top tier draft picks and pay him big money. This is your chance to go get that wide receiver with the big money. I think it would be really useful if they did that. And then there's also the question of, if you sign T. Higgins, do you also sign George Pickens? Who do you keep from this current offensive core whose contracts are about to be running out? They've already signed Pat Freiermuth. It looks like they're going to let Najee Harris walk. George Pickens, what do they do with his contract year being this upcoming season? A lot of those big questions. And I think that, while you're not investing in the quarterback, it's imperative that you invest in the things around the quarterback position to have it ready for when you do find your quarterback.
Yeah, a lot of big decisions coming up for that front office. And if we want to go back to the Con Weidl discussion again, the Eagles have never been a team that's been afraid to spend in free agency, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even before Saquon Barkley, didn't they go out and sign Javon Hargrave to a huge deal? And Javon Hargrave helped them get to a Super Bowl. So, listen, we kind of always think of like the Steelers front office operating in the way that Kevin Colbert did, and maybe the previous generation of Rooneys did. But maybe, with Khan just being in his third year right now, starting his third year, maybe we'll see a different type of spending in free agency too. That's certainly a different way that you could build their team. Obviously, you're always going to want to build through the draft. All the good teams do that, but I think the Steelers have been lacking behind in free agency spending. It'll be interesting to see if Weidl can convince Khan that they have to do that here in Pittsburgh as well.
It will be interesting because I do think that that's part of what the Steelers have to evaluate right now. We'll get to more of what they have to evaluate next year on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. But first, I want to remind you the show is brought to you also by Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci. They are up there. They are mesothelioma and asbestos lawyers with over 85 years of experience. Call them today for a free consultation. That's Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci. We're also brought to you by Moon Township Honda, where you can get your new Honda vehicle at 5802 University Boulevard in Moon Township, PA, or visit their website at moonhonda.com. Here's a message from our friends at Moon Township Honda.
We gave the all-electric Prologue EX class-leading passenger space. And we made its tech intuitive with Google built-in. Perhaps that's why we were named Best Overall EV and Hybrid Brand by Kelley Blue Book. It's nice when a dream comes together. Buy online, reserve from select dealers, or visit your local Honda dealer today.
We're back here in the North Shore Drive podcast of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, let's talk about one thing that Art Rooney kind of addressed when it comes to the Steelers coaching staff. Now, Mike Tomlin alluded at the during his press conference the other week that there would be some changes to the coaching staff. Art Rooney kind of indicating that the coaching roster is not set for this year, but also indicating there's not going to be wholesale changes, which kind of signals no big changes. Of course, Mike Tomlin sticking around, they've made that clear, but Arthur Smith and Terrell Austin seems like their jobs are also safe. We thought Arthur Smith might be first year of an offensive coordinator. That kind of made sense. Terrell Austin was the one you and I were looking at, like maybe there'd be something there. And then, of course, there's Pat Meyer, the offensive line coach. But the Steelers do have the opportunity to make some coaching changes here. And something that you and I have talked about, something that Brian wrote about over the past weekend, and we've talked about on this show, is the importance of maybe adding coaches to the staff, and not just, smaller position coaches, but overall guys who could be coordinators that are coordinator level like coaches who become senior assistants that can help you become more efficient at running the football, help you become more efficient in how you set up your blitz packages, things like that could go a long way. And I just wonder your opinion. Are those the things that Art Rooney's kind of signaling that could be different for the Steelers coaching staff? Or is this just a matter of, a couple guys' contracts are going to run out, they're going to replace them with new guys, and that's going to be that?
Yeah, I think they're keeping the door open for in addition on the coaching staff. They did that a couple of years ago with Brian Flores when that opportunity kind of presented itself out of the blue. Mike Tomlin went to Art. Art said, "Okay, let's do it." I think more so we are probably talking about position coaches, being let go. And I'm not at the Senior Bowl, this year, but it's interesting when you're in that setting. That's a big, that's a place where a lot of the coaches are looking for jobs, and you'll see a lot of hobnobbing down there, guys trying to land jobs. And on the other side of that too is if we were down there this year, we'd be able to see, okay, so and so is scouting the running backs, or so and so is scouting the D line. I think the Steelers put a lot of effort into that, and that would be another clue about who's staying and who's going. So we'll find out. I think probably this week or next week. I don't think they want to drag that out too much longer, Chris. But I think more so position coaching changes. But I'll leave the door open for like an assistant head coach a la Flores. I think that could be something that could really help the Steelers if they pull the trigger on something like that.
Absolutely. I think that's something that's something the Steelers should explore, like where they're talking about things that they could get better at. And there's an acknowledgement like, hey, there's no quarterback in the draft this year that they think is going to be the guy. This isn't the year to make that aggressive move. There's no quarterback in free agency that's available right now or looks readily available for trade that's going to be flip their offense over right now. So what do? You keep trying to get stronger at the things that you think that you've been working on. And clearly they've been investing players into the offensive line. They've been investing, draft picks. They've been investing money. But now they need to make sure that is a stronger part of the unit next year, of the team next year, because you look at that unit and particularly the run portion of it. When the run game was working, everything else clicked. Russell Wilson looked really good. He averaged over 28 points per game. When the run game went away in the last part of the season, that's when the offense fell off a cliff, because then all of a sudden that balance wasn't there that we were talking about. Russell Wilson was kind of put in some tougher situations. And again, I'm not sure if Russell Wilson's the guy they want to keep for the long haul anyways, but when Justin Fields is in too, when the run game was working, it made it easier on him. It makes it easier. It's just like with Jalen Hurts, when the run game's going, there's so much less pressure on him to have to make all the tight passes into tight passing windows, because people are looking for him to throw. They're not sure because of the Eagles run game. And I think that's where the Steelers need to be investing if they're trying to do anything with coaching staff, and they don't want to get rid of Pat Meyer. They don't want to get rid of, certain guys. It may be about not necessarily replacing them. It may be about adding people that are going to say, hey, you know what? This has been your focus. You keep making that your focus, but this over here is where we've lacked. This part of the game planning and taking what we're finding in film and analytics and applying it into our daily work. That's where adding to the coaching staff could make it easier on the Steelers coaching staff, which has been undermanned for many years now.
Yeah, and listen, a lot of these guys are getting scooped up by teams that are hiring coaches, right? So, the one guy I saw on NFL Network this morning, he's kind of been doing a weekly appearance with them, was Ron Rivera. And Ron Rivera interviewed with the Steelers back when Mike Tomlin did in 2008. He's interviewed for some of these head coaching jobs this year. He's a former Commanders coach. Of course, former coach in Carolina, got to a Super Bowl with the Panthers. So, I don't even think it necessarily has to be a guy who, okay, you come in, you're going to focus on time management, or you're going to focus on analytics. Maybe just like a guy who's been around, who has seen a lot, who has had success, can maybe just bring some different ideas and say, hey, this is the way we did things in Carolina when I had Luke Kuechly, and maybe you just go from there. And we're just spitballing here about what the Steelers need, but there probably are going to be a few coaches available like a Ron Rivera, and it'll be interesting to see if Art Rooney feels like something that Mike Tomlin needs on his staff right now. I think like a lot of people outside the building probably think they do need a fresh set of eyes on things, maybe some new and creative ideas, but we'll see if Art has the same opinion.
We'll see if he does, and we'll see what other moves happen with the Steelers. Again, they said their coaching staff is not set, which means moves are coming. We'll keep you abreast of all those things, as well as what happens at the Senior Bowl, because that's also where Arthur Smith and Mike Tomlin are both at right now as we're doing this. They're observing the talent down there. We'll keep you up to date with all of that here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Stay tuned for all of our podcast episodes, including the North Shore Drive podcast every Monday, Wednesday, Friday on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of the daily content that comes from all of our sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Back Friday with Brian Batko here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.